listened to music while driving. I must have been enjoying the quietness after the commotion of the day, although it had been fun. I reached a section of road that had barren fields on either side and woods set back. Houses were probably nestled back into the trees, and as I drove, I noticed what looked like someone walking up ahead on the opposite side of the road coming in my direction. Mind you, I was still going at about 20 miles per hour the whole time, so it was probably less than a minute by the time the walker came into clear view. I got a quick scan of it from my windshield before my car and it were exactly parallel, and this is what I saw. It was not a person. It stood on two long legs, with long arms hanging down from its shoulders. It was strong-looking, lean, muscular, but not beefy in stature. It looked thin at the same time. It stood at least 7 feet tall. It was light-colored, not sure whether it was white, tan, yellow, or greyish. It didn't appear to have fur, but there was some texture to the skin. It wasn't smooth. There appeared to be something coming down off its back. I don't know what it was. All I can recall about its face is the small features it had, but the mouth and jaw were notably large. It had pointed things atop of its head, two things going straight upwards, with something mingled between the two things. That's what I got from a very quick scan, and from my observation of it as it neared my car. As my car became parallel to it, within a split second, I went from looking at my windshield to looking at it from my driver's side window. In that moment, its face quickly peered down at me, and all I remember was the mouth wide open. Out came a remarkable scream that I shall never forget. Gives me the chills just thinking about it. It consisted of a high-pitched shrill/shriek, enveloped by a deep guttural growl. Both sounds happened simultaneously in that scream. I kept driving all the while. This was happening so fast that I didn't even have a chance to be scared or shocked. I continued driving and went past my friend's house and drove home. I called him to tell him what happened and that I just needed to get back. I was probably running on adrenaline to get back home. Later on, I was in total shock after it sunk in. Had my driver's side window been opened fully, it would have touched me, or worse, taken me. I'm certain of it. To this day, I still haven't worked out what it was. I continued driving. Has anyone else seen anything like this, or heard of it? I'd love to know, to tell him what because I'm still and that I just needed to get back. I was probably running on adrenaline to get back home. In 2010, later on, me and two friends were driving around out of the country. Driver's side window been in Effingham, Illinois. We live about 30 minutes away from there. I'm certain of it. This was a typical weekday night. I still haven't worked. Driving out to a cemetery to respectfully explore. Or heard of it? We were told the Caspar Cemetery, deep in the woods, surrounded by caves outside of Effingham, was a really good place. We head to Effingham and stop for sodas at a gas station, Effingham, and then head to the country. It's about 1 or 2 a.m., so it's dark, and I see something with yellow glowing eyes off the side of the country road, just past the ditch, in the headlights. It was too short to be a deer, but too big to be an opossum or a raccoon. As we get closer, it gets clearer, and I realize that what I am looking at is a skinny, hairless, and grey human-like thing, but definitely not human. Crazy as hell looking. It was crouched. Its arms were incredibly long, and looked like it could have been 7 feet tall, or perhaps more, while standing. I could feel myself. My heart got cold, and it began to race as the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I had no idea what I was staring at, but I was feeling the most pure and rawest fear I had ever felt. I was just taking in the situation and kind of whispered to myself, "What the hell?" And then I heard my friend Harley in the back seat shout, "What the hell is that?" Complete shock and terror set in, and I can't make a sound. I'm just staring at it. By the time we are right in front of it, passing it, it just watches us drive by, and it sinks back into the darkness from whence it came. Then we all start screaming, literally freaking the hell out. I was convinced it was a demon for months, but still doubted myself seeing it, thinking that my mind had played a trick on me. We didn't even make it to the Caspar that night. We went straight home, and I couldn't sleep. 6 months later, I'm at a different friend's house, and she gets a text from her cousin. She sends me this strange picture of a creature, and the hairs on the back of my neck stand up straight, and I went cold. I was seeing this thing again. I knew we weren't crazy, that there was something to this. He said he caught it on his trail camera one town over. He told us later it wasn't his camera, but that he was just pranking us. But nonetheless, I immediately recognized it. I asked her to send me the picture, and I sent it to Harley, and he quickly replies, recognizing the thing that we saw that night. After a while of investigation, I found out that the picture was faked, but still can't help but have my doubts. I researched the pictures of demons to try and find some answer, and nothing. Fast forward to October 2012, and I'm on Facebook, and I come across a page called Weird Effingham, Illinois. So of course I start combing through the entire page, and I find reports of sightings around the cemetery of creatures with glowing eyes. Nothing as in-depth as what I saw, but still enough to tell me that we were not the only ones who must have seen something out there. I researched demons and paranormal stuff for some time, but found nothing. 2 years after that, I'm scrolling through my Facebook feed again, and then comes the infamous faked picture. One girl I know posted it on the wall of another girl, so I immediately commented my story on it. When I got up to the previous comments, I see one of the girls were talking about seeing it as well. She replied to my comment and told me that she had seen it in the country in Effingham too, back in 2011. This guy we went to school with commented on the status too, and said that he had a friend that was super into the occult, and that she said they're called ghouls. So I went right into researching ghouls. What I found blows my freaking mind. Lore says they are cave dwellers, and, as I previously mentioned, Caspar Cemetery is surrounded by caves. They feed on the freshly dead, and normally stay close to cemeteries to be within close proximity of their food source. They've been known to show themselves to humans when trying to get close to them to eat them, when freshly deceased bodies are scarce. I went to images, and I could only find some illustrations, but they look exactly like what I saw that night. Everything I was reading was falling perfectly into place, and lined up perfectly with my experience. I couldn't explain it away. Then last night, I came across a Reddit post with a similar story to mine, in such detail. This is one of the most incredible things that has ever happened to me, and I will always search for more answers. This encounter took place in the winter of 2016 in Davies County, Indiana. It was around 8 o'clock and very dark outside. I was just out feeding my goats as per my routine. The goat shed was around 300 yards away from my home. To get to the shed, I had to cross 2 small fields and walk along a narrow path through the woods. These woods border an Indiana naval facility. After I had finished, I began to walk back. I had crossed 1 field and was about halfway through the narrow path when I started to hear rustling in the underbrush. All I had with me was a little flashlight that only shined about 10 feet in front of me. I was almost to the end of the path when I spotted something. It was on all fours, with a bony frame, elongated limbs, and pale skin. While the first part of that description sounds pretty generic, it did seem to have a long and highly flexible neck. Not long after I noticed, it seemed to notice me, and bolted down the path. It ran, almost scuttling into the second field. This field had a small hill in the center. This thing fled and disappeared over one side. I ran as fast as I could around the other side of the small hill and zigzagged back to my house, where I quickly locked all the doors. This thing was terrifying, but it seemed watchful more than anything, for now at least. In about 2012, my then boyfriend lived in Sweden, and I lived in Canada. He came to visit me, and during one of the evenings, I woke up to something strange perched at the foot of my bed. It was a pale, thin human.
drive would take about 10 minutes if I took the back roads together. So I did. It was a little past 8 p.m. and my friend lived in a housing development surrounding a private lake. You might have called it a gated community. You could still drive through freely after hours by entering one of 4 private entry points. Since the community was built around a lake, the roads surrounding it were in a spiral sort of shape. Those houses were sparsely positioned on the outmost parts of the spiral road, closest to the 4 private entry points. As you drove in further, there were a lot more houses positioned closer together near the lake. My friend lived on the outer edge of this development, so once I reached the entry point, it would only take me another few minutes until I reached his house. His house, along with the others, were far enough apart from each other that you couldn't see them from the road as you drove by. There were either woods all around with long drives, or open fields with long drives. You could see porch lights in the distance, but that was about it. As I entered into the development, the speed limit dropped from 30 miles per hour to 20. There were no street lights in the development, and for some reason, I never put my high beams on. I couldn't go any faster than the speed limit, because there were so many speed bumps in place every 30 feet or so. It was a mild night. I remember having my driver's side window slightly open, taking in some fresh air. And I remember driving in silence, which was unusual, as I usually listened to music while driving. I must have been enjoying the quietness after the commotion of the day, although it had been fun. I reached a section of road that had barren fields on either side and woods set back. Houses were probably nestled back into the trees, and as I drove, I noticed what looked like someone walking up ahead on the opposite side of the road coming in my direction. Mind you, I was still going at about 20 miles per hour the whole time, so it was probably less than a minute by the time the walker came into clear view. I got a quick scan of it from my windshield before my car and it were exactly parallel. And this is what I saw. It was not a person. It stood on 2 long legs, with long arms hanging down from its shoulders. It was strong looking, lean, muscular, but not beefy in stature. It looked thin at the same time. It stood at least 7 feet tall. It was light colored. Not sure whether it was white, tan, yellow or greyish. It didn't appear to have fur, but there was some texture to the skin. It wasn't smooth. There appeared to be something coming down off its back. I don't know what it was. All I can recall about its face is the small features it had, but the mouth and jaw were notably large. It had pointed things atop of its head. 2 things going straight upwards, with something mingled between the 2 things. That's what I got from a very quick scan, and from my observation of it as it neared my car. As my car became parallel to it, within a split second, I went from looking at my windshield to looking at it from my driver's side window. In that moment, its face quickly peered down at me, and all I remember was the mouth wide open. Out came a remarkable scream that I shall never forget. Gives me the chills just thinking about it. It consisted of a high-pitched shrill/shriek, enveloped by a deep guttural growl. Both sounds happened simultaneously in that scream. I kept driving driving all the while. This was happening so fast that I didn't even have a chance to be scared or shocked. I continued driving and went past my friend's house and drove home. I called him to tell him what happened and that I just needed to get back. I was probably running on adrenaline to get back home. Later on, I was in total shock after it sunk in. Had my driver's side window been opened fully, it would have touched me. Or worse, taken me. I'm certain. To this day, I still haven't worked out what it was. Has anyone else seen anything like this? Or heard of it? I'd love to know, because I'm still in the dark. In 2010, me and two friends were driving around out of the country in Effingham, Illinois. We live about 30 minutes away from them. This was a typical weekday night, driving out to a cemetery to respectfully explore. We were told the Caspar Cemetery, deep in the woods, surrounded by caves outside of Effingham, was a really good place. We head to Effingham and stop the sodas at a gas station, and then head to the country. It's about 1 or 2 a.m., so it's dark, and I see something with yellow glowing eyes off the side of the country road, just past the ditch, in the headlands. It was too short to be a deer, but too big to be an opossum or a raccoon. As we get closer, it gets clearer, and I realize that what I am looking is a skinny, hairless, and grey human-like thing, but definitely not human. Crazy as hell. It was crouched. Its arms were incredibly long and looked like it could have been 7 feet tall, or perhaps more, while standing. I could feel myself. My heart got cold, and it began to race as the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I had no idea what I was staring at, but I was feeling the most pure and rawest fear I had ever felt. I was just taking in the situation and kind of whispered to myself, what the hell? And then I heard my friend Harley in the back seat shout, what the hell is that? Complete shock and terror set in, and I can't make a sound. I'm just staring at it. By the time we are right in front of it, passing it just watches us drive by, and it sinks back into the darkness from whence it came. Then, we all start screaming, literally freaking the hell out. I was convinced it was a demon for months, but still doubted myself seeing, thinking that my mind played a trick on me. We didn't even make it to the Caspar that night. We went straight home, and I couldn't sleep. 6 months later, I'm at a different friend's house, and she gets a text from her cousin. She sends me this strange picture of a creature, and the hairs on the back of my neck stand up straight, and I went cold. I was seeing this thing again. I knew we weren't crazy, that there was something to this. He said he caught it on his trail camera 1 town over. He told us later it wasn't his camera, but that he was just pranking us. But nonetheless, I immediately recognized it. I asked her to send me the picture, and I sent it to Harley, and he quickly replies, recognizing the thing that we saw that night. After a while of investigation, I found out that the picture was fake, but still can't help but have my doubts. I researched the pictures of demons to try and find some answer. Nothing. Fast forward to October 2012, and I'm on Facebook, and I come across a page called Weird Effingham, Illinois. So of I start combing through the entire page, and I find reports of sightings around the cemetery of creatures with glowing eyes. Nothing as in-depth as what I saw, but still enough to tell me that we were not the only ones who must have seen something out there. I researched demons and paranormal stuff for some time, but found nothing. 2 years after that, I'm scrolling through my Facebook feed again, and then comes the infamous faked picture. One girl I know posted it on the wall of another girl, so I immediately commented my story on it. When I got up to the previous comments, I see one of the girls were talking about seeing it as well. She replied to my comment and told me that she had seen it in the country in Effingham too, back in 2011. This guy we went to school with commented on the status too, and said that he had a friend that was super into the occult, and that she said they're called old. So I went right into researching old. What I found blows my freaking mind. Law says they are cave dwellers, and, as I previously mentioned, Caspar Cemetery is surrounded by caves. They feed on the freshly dead, and normally stay close to cemeteries to be within close proximity of their food source. They've been known to show themselves to humans when trying to get close to them to eat them, when freshly deceased bodies are scarce. I went to images, and I could only find some illustrations, but they look exactly like what I saw then. Everything I was reading was falling perfectly into place, and lined up perfectly with my experience. I couldn't explain it away. Then lastly, I came across a Reddit post with a similar story to mine, in such detail. This is one of the most incredible things that has ever happened to me, and I will always search for more answers. This encounter took place in the winter of 2016 in Davies County, Indiana. It was around 8 o'clock and very dark outside. I was just out feeding my goats as per my routine. The goat shed was around 300 yards away from my home. To get to the shed, I had to cross 2 small fields and walk along a narrow path through the woods. These woods border an Indiana naval facility. After I had finished, I began to walk back. I had crossed 1 field and was about halfway through the narrow path when I started to hear rustling in the underbrush. All I had with me was a little flashlight that only shined about 10 feet in front of me. I was almost to the end of the path when I spotted something. It was an all-four, with a bony frame, elongated limbs, and pale skin. While the first part of that description sounds pretty generic, it did seem to have a long and highly flexible neck. Not long after I noticed, it seemed to notice me, and bolted down the path. It ran, almost scuttling into the second field. This field had a small hill in the center. This thing fled and disappeared over one side. I ran as fast as I could around the other side of the small hill and zigzagged back to my house, where I quickly locked all the doors. This thing was terrifying, but it seemed watchful more than anything. But now at least. In about 2012, my then boyfriend lived in Sweden, and I lived in Canada. He came to visit me, and during one of the evenings, I woke up to something strange perched at the foot of my bed. It was a pale, thin, humanoid figure. It was completely hairless, and the legs seemed to be bound in some way. It seemed to walk on all fours despite looking human. see much of its face, since it was looking away from me. It looked a lot like the creature from the fictional story, The Ring. When I gasped, it hopped off the bed and into the darkness. My partner heard me and woke up to ask me what was wrong. I didn't tell him, as not to alarm him while trying to rest. In 2014, he was visiting once more, and we were once again in bed sleeping. I woke up to hear my boyfriend screaming like I'd never heard it before. I immediately turned on the light and shook him to try and snap him out of it, but he just screamed and then cried. After 30 minutes or so, he finally was calm enough to explain what had happened. Apparently, he woke up to a pale humanoid figure with a gaping mouth and black, sunken eyes, basically on top of him. As he screamed, the figure slowly backed itself into the closet while staring at him the whole time and crawling on all fours. I felt sick. I never ever told him about what I saw a few years ago, and there's no way he could have known, and described what I saw perfectly. Now here's why I'm posting. It showed up again. My ex messaged me today, as we're still friends, and told me that his now girlfriend had seen what he refers to as the pale ring. They were asleep, and apparently she woke up to see this thing stalking around the room, and it noticed her frozen in bed, so it crawled up next to her. My ex woke up and tried to console her, and she was describing what she saw. It apparently was a perfect match to the thing we both saw. I only ever told him what I saw after his experience, and she had never heard of either of our experiences. Is this just a mass coincidence of hallucinating while waking? Is it a demon of some sort? A haunting? A skinwalker? I have no clue. But I am legitimately freaked out. I lost a lot of time once. It's one of a few very creepy things to happen to me. But this one really got to me, and still does. It only happened a few months ago. I went for a walk with my mother on a local path, around a fairly large hill. A regular pastime of ours. We walked the 2 miles from the car to the hill, before beginning our ascent to reach the loop, which is only about a half-mile encircling. We're from the area, and have always known that people have become wildly lost up there, even though the path is the only one around the hill. It's sort of very specific knowledge. If you go 10 miles away, no one will know about it. We had been dozens of times before, with the dogs usually, but today it was just my mum and I. We had never been lost before. So, we've been walking for I don't know how long, when I noticed something odd. The sun was in the same place to us as it had been for however long we'd been walking, on a circular path. It should have appeared to have moved as we changed directions. We should have also been reaching the point where you headed down the hill. But our path was completely different. I was taught to use the sun and other natural science to navigate, as I spend a lot of time just wandering, whether on horseback or on foot. At that point I realized I had no recollection of that part of the path, and had been walking along in silence. Oh, here's the weird bit. Out came my phone, and it showed me the time was 2:37. I had absolutely no signal, even though it's usually spot on up there. We had set off at 11 in the morning, and all the hairs on my body stood up. This was a short walk, an hour and a half at most, and leaving the car and getting back to it included. The sun should have been above us, but it was set off to where it would have said 3 o'clock for that time of the year. I remember the time, because when I turned to ask my mum what time she had, she looked straight through me, like I wasn't there, and remained like that for a whole 3 minutes. She was just staring off into space, and to her left. Then at 2:40 she suddenly came to life. I had moved away at that point, too nervous to remain under her gaze like that. After about a minute of saying, "Mum," and nudging her in the rigid shoulder, in a building childlike panic, even though I was 20, I sat on a log just off the path, getting pretty freaked out. My mum glanced around and said in a hollow, weird voice, "I think the fairies might have us. We need to keep walking." I scrambled up and fell in to match her determined strides on this unfamiliar path. "Why fairies, Mum? Why say that?" I wasn't raised to see them as little cutesy people with wings, you see. To me, they're straight out of nightmares, because my mother's upbringing said that's what they were. Creatures out to confuse and trick. "What time does your watch say, Mum?" She always wears a battery-operated analog watch, and she lifts up her wrist. 3:15. She puts her wrist down and lifted it up again to check. "That's not right." I just shook my head. "Alright, keep walking." So we did. We trudged on through this unfamiliar woodland for what I would have said felt like half an hour. It never turned a corner or changed elevation. I knew we were in bother when my stalwart, never frightened of anything mother, began to get nervous. So in response to her nerves, she became pissed off. She steeled herself, lifted those proud, all-seeing gypsy eyes to the creepy atmosphere, and spoke as she would to a lurking person. "Who's toying with us? Put us back." There was what I can only describe as a burst of deep laughter from the path behind us, and we spun around to face it. We were at the top of a hill that led to the gate out of there. It was at the fork where you can go either left or right, neither of which I remember choosing, even though we always made a decision of it. We made our own way down the slope and out of the woods as calmly as possible, and got back to the car, which was parked next to an ancient church cemetery. The time in the car? 5:12. We should have got back to the car no later than maybe 1:45 if the walk had gone normally, or just after 4 when our watch and phones said we were approaching 3. We lost nearly 5 hours. I've had a lot of creepy stuff happen to me, but this is about the worst. I wasn't alone. It was the middle of the day on a usually familiar path. Where did those hours go? Where was that path? So many unanswerable questions. I even went up there one day alone just to see if I could experience it again, but nothing happened.
Sightings of flying humanoids in Europe, or creepy run-ins with the red Sasquatch in North America. These creatures seem to be lurking just about everywhere possible. Just when you thought you were safe in your home, something lurks in the shadows. These subscribers sent in their allegedly true encounters with cryptic creatures that will freak you out. If you have a story you'd like to share, be sure to send it in to swampdweller.net or the email in the description you can find down below. One last thing before we get into these tales that will freak you out. My good friend Southern Cannibal helped me narrate some of these stories today. If you enjoy his voice, be sure to check out his channel, as he does a lot of creepy stuff over there. Now, let's get into these stories. I'm going to start off with some background information. I'm a 21-year-old male who grew up in a rural area on a small reservation about an hour northwest of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Growing up, I lived with my grandmother, who was very in tune with the spiritual side of life and was very well respected by her community. I spent a lot of time in the woods hunting and camping as a young man and was fully aware of spirits and how some were good, some were bad, and there existed creatures out there that defied explanation. Now, at the time of this story, I was somewhere around 17, I think. It was summer break, and I went down to my reservation to visit my cousins, who were like siblings to me as I'd grown up with them. My older cousin had some alcohol, and altogether, there were 7 of us who gathered on this warm, beautiful summer night. The night was clear, stars were out, and the moon was in full view, as we had fun joking, laughing, and listening to music, and just being kids, really. While a lot of us drank that night, I didn't drink much because my mom would have kicked my ass if she found out I was drinking. My cousins, however, were getting more and more drunk by the hour. It was about 12:30 a.m. when I got a call from my cousin Ben, who said he wanted to come down too after hearing I was in town. He told me he'd walk toward us and meet us at the crossroads. Me being the only sober one, I rallied everyone together for the long walk, which I hoped would sober them up a bit. As we began walking down the old dirt road, I began to feel that something wasn't quite right. It was very quiet. Too quiet. The only real noise was coming from my cousin's drunk, obnoxious voices. Which was pretty off, as normally there are frogs and all sorts of things around at night making all sorts of noises. Again, I tried to tell everyone something was off, but, drunk, they brushed it off and laughed. We were about 40 meters away from the crossroads when I saw it. A giant creature, hiding by the underbrush of the trees near the crossroads. It just stood there, staring at us, hiding from the streetlight in such a way that if you weren't paying attention, you'd have missed it. This was the first time I'd ever feel a real shiver down my spine or my hair stand on the back of my neck. It seemed as though the creature was waiting for us. I stopped dead in my tracks and stared, afraid to move. The creature stood about 7 feet tall, was bipedal and humanoid. It had what looked like to be bull legs and a long tail that stuck out. But its upper half almost looked human. It wore a long black trench coat, at least that's what it looked like. Its face was that of a bull's, with black fur all around and glowing eyes. I've never felt so afraid for my life. After what seemed like hours, it was likely only minutes of staring at this thing, my cousin stopped and asked me what was wrong. I didn't reply, and they began muttering in confusion until my eldest cousin Joe said, Guys, look! Pointing at the crossroads where I was staring, my cousins all looked and finally saw the thing. We all freaked out, and my fight or flight kicked in, at which point I turned and ran as fast as I could away from the creature. Didn't dare look back to see if we were being pursued. I just kept hauling it, till we were all the way home. Upon finally arriving at the house, we all stared at one another silent and afraid. I soon called my cousin Ben to let him know we decided to head back to the house instead of meeting him at the crossroads. The strangest part was, he informed me he never called me to meet up, that he was in the city of Edmonton spending the weekend with his girlfriend. This really tripped me out. I checked the call log to see if he'd called, at which point I realized his call never logged to my phone. I was thinking, what the heck? This is really weird. where the story ends.
I live in Hungary, in a suburb about 30 to 40 kilometers from Budapest. Despite the local stories about such, I've lived here for 12 years and never really had stories of paranormal phenomena. About a year ago, I was working in a PC shop franchise store, and about 5 kilometers from where I live was one of the shops from our franchise. Normally we work from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. for about 5 or 6 days a week, and then we're off. But it was early December and people are nuts that time of year with shopping, so I was working my 8th straight day of work and also overtime. Closing the store at the end of the day, I jumped into my car and began to drive home. There's 2 roads that can get me home. One is the main road, which is constantly filled with traffic jams, and the other is a back road with nothing but woods on one side and a field on the other. This road was in very bad shape, and as such, virtually no one would use it for fear of destroying their cars or tires. At this time, I was still driving my first car, which was a really banged up 97 Opel, so I didn't really care about damage to my car. There were no streetlights on this road, and as such, my car's lights were the only lights visible at the time. You need to understand that this is a road I've traveled hundreds of times by car, on a bike, and on foot, and I've never seen anything out of the ordinary here. This night, however, I saw the coolest thing ever. There was a flock of birds rushing the road, and even though I didn't care much about my old junker, I was traveling slow on the road as I didn't feel like walking home on a December night because my car broke down from my carelessness. I've always been a city boy, but had basic knowledge of how wildlife could hurt you if you were careless, and there's laws against killing certain animals, even accidentally. Because of this, I stopped to let these birds cross. I had been listening to my headphones as I don't have a car radio, and I know this is dangerous to do while driving, but I figured I'm on a road with no one else, so it should be safe. So I was debating getting out and taking one of the birds as a pet. It was at this point that I realized they weren't birds. They were tiny owls. Realizing this, I didn't take any of the birds as 1, they are protected by law, and 2, where there are kids, there are likely any parents lurking nearby, and the last thing that I wanted was an adult owl attacking me. Deciding to just watch the birds, and with my headphones on full blast, I suddenly believed I heard something. Taking off my headset, I listened closely, but I heard nothing. At least at first. Just as I was about to put my headphones back on my head, I heard the most otherworldly screech I've ever heard in my life. It was high-pitched, but also like a growl, if that makes any sense at all. I was scared shitless, but then I thought maybe it was a mother owl trying to scare me away, or another predator. Keep in mind, I'd never heard an owl screech, so I didn't know if this is what they did. The moment this thought crossed my mind, I somewhat relaxed, thinking that maybe I'd been overthinking things. It turns out I was quite wrong. The next thing I saw, only for a split second, has been burned into my mind forever. Something flew down and snatched at least one of the owls and then went back into the air. The creature was bipedal and grabbed the owls with hands with long claws on them. The creature was also lean, muscular, and had huge bat-like wings. It landed at one point in a crouched position, but even sitting like this, it was huge. I never saw its head, but from the side it looked as though it had short black fur. In a large flapping noise, it instantly vanished into the night. I saw some snow dust from where it vanished from, and the entire incident lasted maybe a few seconds at most, but it instantly put me into panic mode. I floored it, and my only thought was that I needed to get out of here now. About 3 huge bumps later, though, I slowed down, and again, not wanting to be stuck walking in the cold or out in the open with that thing lurking around. When I finally made it home, I attempted to logically think out what had happened. I didn't have a logical explanation, however, as I wasn't sleep deprived. I also didn't drink, and I didn't do drugs. To this day, I have no idea what that thing was, and I've never shared my story with anyone else. Not even family. I no longer work where I once did, and so I have no reason.
You can postmate almost anything, like last-minute party favors. hot tub filled with champagne. But you can Postmate enough champagne to fill a hot tub. Postmates, get anything delivered. Well, almost anything.
Reason to use that road again, nor would I, especially at night. If anyone else has an idea of what this thing could have been, please let me know.
It was last summer, and I was at a bonfire at a friend's house with a good friend of mine, Mike, his wife, and their 4 kids. The adults were drinking beer around the fire and the kids were playing on the trampoline. Everyone was enjoying themselves that night. Eventually we all gathered around the fire after playing a game of tag with the kids. Mike and I were talking around the fire when we heard what sounded like a small puppy crying. "Do you hear that?" Mike asked. I replied, "Yeah, sounds like a dog or something in the woods." "I bet it's a coyote pup," Mike said, while motioning to the woods behind him. The night went on and continued drinking, talking while collecting more firewood for the fire from the woodpile. An hour goes by and we could still hear what sounds like a puppy crying. Eventually, I rose up, grabbed my cane, and got a flashlight when Mike asked me, "You gonna go check it out?" To which I replied, "Yeah, it's bothering me. Besides, it might be a pup and that would be kinda cool." I walked about 100 yards from the group towards the forest. Then I stopped, listening to my surroundings, hoping to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. It wasn't long before I started hearing it again. I walked into the woods about 20 yards, when the sound suddenly stopped. I stopped as well, listening closely. Maybe 30 seconds later I hear the sound once again. This time it's about 20 feet in. It sounds like it might be in front of me, in this brush. I turned the flashlight on and started scanning the area, hoping to catch any reflection of the eyes. This was an extremely bright flashlight that lit the whole area around me, but I never saw any eyes. Still, I could hear the whimpering though. I knelt down and tried to beckon it, with kissing sounds in a soft voice, much the way one might call their own puppy or dog. Still, nothing. A few seconds later, out of nowhere, with no sound or movement in the woods, I heard the whimpering again. This time 20 feet to the left of me. I was thrown, as it's impossible for something to move that fast without making some kind of movement or noise. There were tons of leaves, so it should have crunched at least that. I shrugged this off, rationalizing maybe there was more than one puppy, before continuing my search. After a few more minutes trying to coax the puppy out of the bush, the sounds jumped to my left again, about 15 to 30 feet away. At this point, I'm quite perplexed by the situation. What the heck is going on? I grumbled to myself. That's when the sound jumped back to the original spot I heard it from, upon beginning my search. As I'm searching, confused, I suddenly hear a loud screech bellow out from the tree above me. This sound was loud, angry, and like nothing I'd ever heard before. Looking up, I saw this thing only for a split second before it jumped to another tree. It was a man-sized creature with arms and legs, no hair, and had very grayish, pale-colored skin. The thing was very thin, and just didn't look natural at all. After it jumped to the next tree, I tried to give chase, but when I arrived at the next tree, there was nothing. There was no movement in the trees anymore, and I tried to listen for any sound, but still, nothing. Mike and a friend soon showed up after, having heard me shout earlier. They asked if I was okay, and I attempted to explain to them what I had seen. While explaining this, I saw movement in the trees, and I immediately checked it out. In the tree was a black mist that soon turned deeper into the forest. Shortly after this, one of the women screamed, asking if we had seen something. I asked her what she'd seen, and she explained there was a black smoke that shot off unnaturally into the woods. I can't say for sure, as I never found it or witnessed it again, but I believe what I saw that night could have been a Wendigo. I believe it was mimicking the sounds of a puppy to lure in one or more of the children to the woods. neighborhood surrounded by thick, dark forest in East Michigan. We often get all kinds of wildlife out here. But something is very off about the woods themselves. The woods are very dark, even for woods, and always get this feeling of eeriness when I go near them. It's like I'm being watched by something. One night, something quite strange happened that I'll remember forever. I was out in the yard and it was getting dark, which I didn't really think much of as I love sitting out at night, watching the stars. That's when I was overcome with an overwhelming fear of being watched. Looking towards the woods, I see what looks like a 7-foot-tall, unnaturally skinny person. A feeling of curiosity overwhelmed me and I walked towards the creature at first. That's when the figure turned towards me, but it changed. I was now looking at a buck with huge antlers. I thought I was going crazy, and stood there, lost and confused as the deer went into the woods. The thing never took its eyes off me as it did this. A few months go by, and I basically forgot about the incident until one late winter night when I awoke about midnight feeling an intense panic. Looking towards my window, I saw it. A 7-foot-tall thin figure. From what little I could see, it seemed like an emaciated human, with the face and muzzle of a deer. It had long, unnatural arms that ended in clawed hands. What was I even looking at? The thing eventually slowly moved away from the window, at which point, my fear subsided. The next morning I checked for tracks in the snow, but there were only deer tracks. Nothing I could really claim as out of the ordinary. I was maybe 3 or 4 when this happened. I grew up in Shallow Water, Kansas. It's a quiet town with not many people living there back then and far less living there now. I was in my grandmother's front yard playing in the dirt when on top of a school across the way I see something hunched over out of the corner of my eye. It was too small to be a man or woman, and I seriously doubted a child would be up on the roof. I looked at it for a couple of minutes and noticed it was tall, black, and looked to be eating a small animal of some kind. It had red eyes, and I could see this thing plain as day. You know how gray aliens supposedly look? Its eyes were large like that, but red. I also remember the thing had a large mouth. Eventually the thing noticed me, stood up and jumped off the school, slowly walked towards me, never losing eye contact as it did this. After about the 4th step, I ran inside screaming and crying. Unfortunately, that's all I really remember. Apparently, according to my dad, I was screaming and begging him and my grandpa not to go outside because of the black creature. My grandpa loaded his Remington 870 with slugs and headed outside anyway. He eventually found tracks heading north about 15 feet before they simply disappeared. The tracks had 3 long toes with short and sharp nails. I've only been back to that town once since I moved. It was a few months ago and I still get that same feeling as I did as a child. It feels like something is there, watching me from a place I can't see. One final thing. My father told me he was talking to my grandma a few weeks before the initial incident when they had medium-sized footsteps on top of the house that eventually landed on the AC unit outside of the home, damaging it. He claims whatever it was couldn't be human as his footsteps were too loud, too heavy, and moved too fast. He stayed up the entire night, shotgun loaded but found nothing. I never found out what the thing was either, and refused to go back to that town, unarmed, ever again. I was 15 years old when I went to my grandparents' house in the middle of nowhere, Nevada. There was nothing but desert for miles, and I'd heard from an old desert rat that we'll call Jay about Indian folklore and Wendigos. I was amazed by his story of an encounter with one, and the folklore in general. Still, up until the point of the story, I still didn't really believe in such things. Late one night, though, it was pitch black, and I was outside the back of the house looking at the stars. wasn't long before I heard something shuffling around the garage. I looked back and saw my granddad, but I couldn't shake this really bad feeling.
Hey, what's up, my friend Calicanai here. In a moment, I'm gonna step into my office here at my home and pull out my computer.
He told me to come find him, but something in his voice wasn't right. Saying nothing, I headed in and asked my grandma why my granddad was in the garage with no lights, at which point she gave me a weird look before going back to washing the dishes. I soon went into my living room, and much to my horror, there was my grandfather, laying on the couch sleeping. I went to bed soon after and was awoken at about 1 in the morning to the sound of footsteps and this awful decaying smell outside my window. It was open because there was no AC in the house. The fact that the only thing separating me from whatever was outside was a thin screen in the window really was not comforting. I tried to chalk it up to my imagination going wild, and maybe being an animal or something. But then, I heard more footsteps, and I could tell whatever it was standing on 2 legs. I thought, okay, maybe a bird, but then I heard more footsteps. The strides it was taking were too heavy and too long to be a bird. But whatever was out there suddenly started running back and forth in front of the house before finally stopping outside my window. Hearing this made my heart sink. I was overwhelmed by the smell of rotting decay. I finally gathered the strength to look up, and that was a huge mistake. I realize now that I was staring directly at this thing. It was tall, skinny, had patches of dark fur and the head of a deer. The antlers it had looked like that of a deer on one side and the elk on another side. It tried speaking to me and telling me to go outside, but its voice sounded as though it couldn't put any real emotion to its words. I screamed and without thinking grabbed my hunting rifle before blasting through my window. My grandparents naturally came rushing in, and we heard a yell out back. In the 10 seconds it took us to get out back, we all saw him. This thin, unnaturally long-legged thing. And then it was gone. Nothing, I mean nothing can move that fast. This incident haunts us to this day. We never go outside after dark, nor will we ever again. I live in the UK, and we don't have many dangerous animals here. My dad works on a farm where they have a big problem with foxes and rabbits, which we hunt, by the way. The most effective way of hunting these animals at night is through thermal and night vision. One night, when I was about 12, we were out shooting. This was about midnight by this point. We were on the way back home. We scanned the field and saw nothing until we reached a point roughly 50 yards from us. I could see a dark shape, and assuming it was a fox, I got ready to shoot. It was then, when it stood up, I realized it wasn't a fox. The creature had a long tail that curled up at the end, a short face, and stood about 4 feet tall. I was pretty sure it was a cat, and a big one at that, but we don't have these in the UK. This was confirmed when the animal turned its head and stared straight at me. It was a big cat. It started crouching and slowly made its way towards us. I had watched a few documentaries, so I knew that the animal was now stalking us. I was frozen solid and the hair stood on the back of my head. I don't usually get scared, but I was terrified as it was around 20 yards away now and it lunged towards us. I snapped out of my daze and then moved the shotgun down before firing. I heard a screech, almost human-like, that was very loud. I knew I hit it, but it ran off. My dad switched up on the head torch he had, and we moved closer. I could see quite a bit of blood on the ground. We didn't find it that night, but I know it's probably dead. Before someone says I'm cruel or evil, it was me or my dad or that animal. So, yeah, that's my story. We never saw anything like that again. But still, I continue to go shooting at night multiple times a month. It all started with a camping trip that I had been planning with some friends of mine. We all all live in the Central Florida area, and we planned on going north a bit to camp in a free site that we found. Unfortunately, one thing led to another, and I was the only one able to get the time off as it was in December, and becoming more and more difficult to get vacation time. I didn't let this stop me, as I wanted to go camping for years now, and this was the best shot that I had. The plan was to only stay for 2 nights. I would head to the site, set up camp, my friends would join me for the first day, and I would be alone for the rest. When I got to the parking lot, I talked to an older man named Stanley, who was a retired park ranger who had looked after the campsite. He gave me directions to my site and went over a few rules, like no unattended fires, no loud noises after 10 p.m., and to leave the spot as clean as you found it. After I got my tent and table set up, I decided to visit the 2 neighboring campsites. It was about a 10-minute walk to the next site, either way, so it would help me waste some time before my friends got off work and joined me. My neighbors to the west of me were an elderly couple that were packing up just as I arrived. The neighbor to the east of me was a man in his maybe mid-40s. His name was Pete. Pete was an odd-looking fellow who was dressed in an open shirt-sleeved Hawaiian shirt with no undershirt and a massive beer gut hanging out, tattered cargo shorts, and flip-flops. This year, our winter was pretty warm, so this didn't really surprise me. After introducing myself, we shared some beers and talked for a few hours. I asked him, "So what brings you to the woods this time of year?" And he replied, "Squatching." I laughed for a bit and noticed he was serious. He said that Sasquatch, or skunk ape as they're called in Florida, live in the area, and he has a few cameras set up here in the heavily wooded areas, behind both of our campsites. After talking for a bit more, my friends texted me, so I thanked Pete for the beers and told him good luck to his hunt. After my friends had left for the night, I decided to pack it up at around 10:30 p.m. I snuffed out my fire, entered my tent, and began to drift off to sleep. In a somewhat strange way, the forest almost becomes louder at night as the sound of crickets.
Out of the ashes you will rise. I can say that if you feel sad, lost, depressed, if your health is suffering, finances are in the gutter, social life you're lonely, depression, if you're in a fall all day, can't find that happiness that everybody sees. Out of the ashes you will rise. That's at the end of the day, the quickest summary.
Crickets and owls filled the night. I found it very relaxing and it helped me fall asleep. I was soon awoken in the middle of the night. It was strangely silent. No crickets, no owls, not even the occasional nightingale. Just silence. Then I hear it. It started as a low howl and ended up as a sharp whoop. Now, I have heard coyotes before, and their howl is much too high-pitched for this to be some sort of coyote. My heart started racing. I had never heard anything like this before. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes, I heard a loud crack as it sounded like someone took a branch and cracked it over a tree, followed by several loud cracks following it. I heard of Sasquatch using wood knocking to communicate, and this is definitely what it sounded like to me. Has anyone from the North Florida or South Alabama, Georgia area ever heard a similar sound? Sounds like a skunk ape to me, and I bet they definitely live in this area. My story is kind of short, but a really strange one. When I was maybe 8 or 9, I had never experienced anything strange or unexplainable. I never believed in ghosts or ghouls or anything like that. But one night, all that had been thrown out the window. One night after me and my mom had gotten back after a long shopping spree, when we got home, I helped unpack the groceries, and then joined my mom for a movie. At around 8:30, my mom told me it was time to hit the hay, so I did. I sprawled out of my bed, my mom came and tucked me in, and before I knew it, I was asleep. Now this is where things get a tad strange. I had woken up at around 12:30 in the morning. I opened my eyes and examined my room until something came in contact with the trees outside my window. For a a while, I just stared at them until I noticed movement. I just stared at what looked like a hairless demon squirrel of some sort slowly and unnaturally crawling down from the top of a tree. I rubbed my eyes, not believing what I was seeing. But when I opened an abnormally large head compared to its body. Its limbs were lanky and distorted with legs that went back just like a bird's. It was skinny to the point where you could see bones, and it was pretty pale and gray. I started hyperventilating as this thing was looking through all of the windows in my apartment complex while positioning itself on a branch. Then, its eyes met mine, but they didn't look like eyes. They looked like empty sockets where the eyes should be. It didn't seem to have a mouth, 2 slits for a nose. I hid under my covers for about 5 seconds, then looked back and it was gone. I ran to my mom crying and stuttering my words before telling her everything that had happened. But she didn't believe me and chalked it up to just being a bad dream. But I know what I saw. I am now much older and have told my friends about it, and they all somehow believe me. I don't know what I saw that night. Maybe it was just a dream, or maybe it actually was real. Or maybe it's just some kind of misconception or something. I don't know, but I don't want to ever see it again.
So just lying down, we're going to focus the attention on the
werewolves, Sasquatch, skinwalkers, wendigos, and more. All the things that go bump in the night that give you nightmares you'll find in this series. Today, I'm covering more stories sent in by subscribers just like you, who have had allegedly true experiences with unknown cryptid creatures. If you have a story that you'd like to share in a future video, be sure to send it in to the email or the website you can find in the description down below. Joining me today and helping me share your tales of terror is a good friend of mine known as Grimtail Brothers. Please subscribe to them if you enjoy their voice. I think you'll like the videos they put out. Now, let's get into these creepy cryptid encounters. For as long as I can remember, I've always heard of the creature called Sasquatch inhabiting the woods of southern Illinois. Ever since I was a child, when I heard that every generation of my family since we immigrated to southern Illinois from Germany in 1840 have had encounters with Sasquatch, I started to spend a lot of time in the woods. Now bear in mind, leading up to this encounter, I had always heard that Sasquatch had been known to be aggressive with humans. But, like most people, I thought it would never happen to me. Little did I know, I would never be more wrong when it came to Sasquatch. On a night in April of 2017, everything would change. My outlook on these creatures of the forest would change forever. Leading up to the encounter, I had been hearing sounds coming from a patch of woods that were off of my family's property. Maybe for a little over 3 weeks. There were whoops, screams, howls, the usual Bigfoot signs. So one night, it was a full moon, and I decided to go in one night while the getting was good and try to get the creatures on audio and video. So, I let the necessary parties know where I was going to be. I got my camera and digital recorder, loaded up in my truck, and I drove down to the woods, where we'd been hearing the sounds come from. I walked in on foot from the main road with my gear, and I found a tree structure and started to record it with my camera. I was hearing movement around me the whole time. My light was on the structure, so I continued on my walk. I was in the meadow that was bordered by trees, creeks, and on both sides. I came across this one creek, and I came up on the other side, and I sat down on a log to rest my back and my legs. I turned on my audio recorder to make note of what I had seen and heard through the night. Then, I reached in my back pocket and pulled out a can of tobacco, took a pinch of it, put it in my lip, and put the can back in my pocket. When I popped the lid back on, it made a really solid sounding pop, like a tree knock. About 10 seconds later, I started hearing chatter all around me, at whisper level. Real quiet, but still distinct enough you could hear speech. So I sat there, and I listened to these 2 or 3 individual creatures talking back and forth, up the hill behind me, up in the trees. I was so mesmerized by listening to them that I forgot to kick my recorder back on. And this went on for about a minute. If these creatures were going back and forth like that, it kind of sounded like children talking. But it wasn't English. I don't know what language or what it could be. Then, I heard a big tree come crashing through the canopy across the creek about 100 yards away. I heard something cannonball the creek and come up the bank. Up out of the creek came a very large Sasquatch, from what I could see in the moonlight. The creature was running across the meadow towards me where I was. So, I got out of there as fast as I could. I got on the phone and called in my backup and told them it was a code black, which means aggressive individual. I made it to the main road, and there was a stone culvert underneath the road. So, I got in, deep enough where I would be out of reach of the creature. I shined my light out the one end into the woods, and I saw the creature come to the edge of the woods that I had run out of. It stood there and watched me, lights coming over the hill and across the woods. I was in the car, and a car horn going off. That's when the creature turned and walked back into the woods. I didn't realize it until I had got back to my truck after my team members dropped me off at it, but I ran out of the woods without my video camera and little tripod. I've been back to that area many times and still haven't been able to find my camera to this day. Word to the wise from this encounter: expect the unexpected. Don't think that just because it's only happened in a country on the other side of the world, that doesn't mean it can happen to you. Sasquatch are unpredictable and are more intelligent than we give them.
I was 5 when this incident took place. My brother and I moved in to live with our nan and pop a few months earlier, as our mom abandoned us that year in 1986. Nan and pop's house had a farm in the Tasmanian country, and there was a beautiful bushland on the right side of the house. I frequently went to the small clearing in the bush, which was visible from the house. So Nan was okay with me going there to pick beautiful smelling begonia flowers. To the story. It was around 5 p.m. when I went to the clearing in the bush. As it was daylight savings, there were 4 hours left of sunlight, so it wasn't considered a bad time of day to go and pick begonia. As I picked my last flower to go home, all the birds that were tweeting away, the sound of the slight breeze, common bush sounds, suddenly stopped. My young kind couldn't grasp any reason why that was so. I went to walk home. Then, I heard footsteps crunching into dry gum leaf and dead bracken. I got a little scared, and then I heard a voice saying, "Becky? Becky, it's me." I heard my mom's softly nervous voice. It was a little off though. I said, Mom, where are you?" At that point, I was starting to cry a little, thinking my mom had come back. But the voice repeated, "Becky, Becky." Then the footsteps I heard earlier were closer to me, and the smell of the begonia, it was overtaken by the stench of off milk. I gagged a little and tried to head home, hoping for some fresh air. But a figure came out into the clearing, moving slowly, like a baby learning to walk. As it got closer, I realized it was an animal on 2 legs, mangy looking and looked starved. Its eyes had a glowing green and yellow color, and they were staring straight at me. I was so scared. I stood there petrified. It looked like some animal
Oh, that's racist. That's racist.
Relax, man.
I know it's a guy.
Wait. I'm just. Wait, what?
Oh, yo, this nigga, this nigga a snitch,
No,
dog?
no,
Yo, he a snitch, yo.
No, wait.
Stripes on each side of that body. It said in front of me. It was trying to lure me by talking like my mom. I dropped the flowers and I ran out to the small clearing through the trees. And as I was about to jump the fence, the creature was running towards me with my flowers in its rotten, smelling looking mouth. Just then, it let out an ear-piercing screech. Then I screamed in terror. But I got over the fence, and when I caught my breath back, I noticed it was dark. I saw torches, and I heard a police radio towards the house. I got to the veranda, and a pop were there, and they just held me so tight. They had police neighbors looking for me. I wasn't in trouble, but they knew I was frightened. I told them I don't remember going further into the bush. They even heard the screech of that thing in the scrub. It turns out I was missing in the bush for 5 hours. It was around 10.
Since 1994, Anthem has been helping Medicaid members get quality, no-cost health.
10 p.m. when I ran back home. I didn't understand how that was possible. After it happened, at school, we were learning about extinct animals in Australia. I went white when I saw a picture of it with Allison. Something evil was trying to pose as a messed up looking Tasmanian tiger. That horrible has made me despise the smell of Baronia for years, which I once loved. Now I'm 37. I can have those flowers in my home without being triggered into fear again. That was the first and last time I encountered that creature. This happened back when I was 12 or 13 years old. Now, a little backstory here. My dad and I volunteered at a bird banding station. If you don't know what bird banding is, it's where researchers put small metal bands on the legs of birds and then release them to track their migration patterns. We set out mist nets in the woods to catch the birds. We used nets instead of traditional traps so we wouldn't harm the birds. So anyway, the guy who owned the bird banding station and the entire property, let's call him R, would let me wander the woods while he was collecting birds out of the nets. R's property was massive, with woods, countryside, marshland, you name it. Now back to the story. It was a cool summer morning. I was wandering in my usual part of the forest. It wasn't long before I noticed that it was unusually silent. It was odd. I usually hear at least one thrush or blue jay. There was nothing. All of a sudden, in the distance, I hear what sounds like a distressed baby deer or cat. Being the curious animal lover I was, I followed the noise. However, as I got closer to the sound, it seemed to grow a lot further away. It wasn't long before I came to the edge of ours property. The wailing sounded like it was coming from nearby 1 minute, from sounding far away the next. Despite being confused and a little creeped out, I still followed it. A few moments later, I came across a small deer blind. I looked inside to see if anyone was messing with me, and nobody was there. When I got a better look at the blind, I noticed something a little bit off about it. It looked like there were massive slashes on the sides. It looked like if a person had slashed it with a knife or an animal's claw marks. But there were no bears in my part of Michigan. Odd. So being the curious 13-year-old I was, I continued on my way to find this distressed animal. I was walking along the edge of ours woods, trying not to go too far. I'm starting to get frustrated. Where the heck was this scream coming from? So being the naive little girl I was, I mimicked the noise right back at the animal, to see if it would show itself. Not a minute passes by, and I hear a noise that I will never forget. It sounded like a dog's growl, mixed with a buck's grunt. No deer sounded like it. Something in my brain told me to get the heck out of there, and I did. Leaping over twigs and branches until I'm in ours front yard. As I make my way towards his house, I hear the growl coming from the woods, about 10 meters behind me. So instead, I run towards the research sack, since R wasn't at the house and the doors would most likely be locked. I knew that no one would believe me, so I just said that a deer growled at me. However, I have heard deer grunts and snorts all my life, and they do not even compare to what I heard this animal make. It didn't sound like a coyote or a dog either. Although I never saw anything, I believe. for us, we made a mad dash to our trucks and got the heck out of there. We did come back in the morning to get our tents and stuff. They were all ripped to shreds though. I don't know what happened to the tents. We also checked out the trees and there were deep claw marks carved all in them. I can tell you what we saw was not a black bear, and I'm honestly scared of what I saw. So if you ever go to Wrangell, California for camping, very, very careful. Take protection. Never know what you're gonna find out in those woods. Not everything out there has been documented by man. My nerves. Mostly because I was complaining about my bladder and how dim the headlamp was. The light was so faint that it only illuminated 5 feet in front of me, so I ended up relying on the light of the moon to guide me. I made it to the porta potty without incident, relieved my bladder, then headed back to the tent. Once I was about halfway there, it struck me. The forest was now silent, eerily silent. My mind began imagining the horrors of what was lurking in those woods. Skinwalkers, wendigos, Bigfoots, who were just waiting for me to get in range so they could snatch me up and eat me. With the speed of an Olympic runner, I sprinted the last 20 yards back to camp. The headlamp's light almost died. Upon arriving at camp and catching my breath, I got the sensation I was being watched, which really started to freak me out. I turned to face the tree line that bordered the lake and saw a pair of large, yellow golden eyes. My tent is very close to this tree line, so whatever this thing was, it was less than 15 feet away. Frozen in fear, I stared back at the eyes. Then my headlamp's light went out, but the eyes of this thing were still glowing. I am a rational person, so I figured it was a coyote or a very large stray dog. My headlamp's light was just reflecting off of the eyes, giving the illusion that they were glowing. So when my headlamp's light went out, I expected the eyes to do the same. However, they did not. They were indeed glowing a gold yellow. Terrified, I took a few steps back and lost my balance, falling straight onto my butt. The eyes were getting closer. The moonlight shone on this creature, revealing a silhouette that in no way matched the size of a coyote or a dog. This thing was far larger and appeared to be on its hind legs. If I had to guess, this creature stood taller than 6 feet, had a hunched over body. It had the head of a dog. If I had to take a guess, it looked like the head was the shape of a husky or one of those wolf dogs or something. Now, I know most people, when they talk about encountering these dog men, they mention a strong feeling of malevolence coming from the creature. Oddly enough, I kind of felt the opposite. The eyes of the creature did not seem to hold any sort of malice or intent to harm me. Rather, I got the sense that it was curious, or at the very least confused. After engaging in a staring contest with this creature, which probably lasted only a minute, the creature got back to all fours and retreated into the forest, but seemingly made no sound as it did so. I don't know if this was a dog man. I know for sure it wasn't a bear. We don't even have grizzlies in Indiana, and black bears aren't all that common. I'm at a loss as to what this creature was. It left no tracks behind in the muddy banks of the lake. It seems almost impossible. What do you guys think? This didn't happen to me personally, but to my older brother. We used to live in a very rural area of Western Canada. The closest town was probably populated with about 1,000 people, maybe even less. It was about a 15-minute drive away from where I was. There's a small village up the hill with a small convenience store and an old abandoned hockey rink. Across from the rink, along the highway, sits the old reservation school. Around the school were multiple portable classrooms, all of them abandoned after the new school was built 6 to 5 years earlier. At night, it gets super dark with the only light coming from the village, or in this night, the moon. My brother had a few of his friends with him, and they decided to go climb or break into the old school or the surrounding buildings. He and 2 of his friends couldn't get into the main building, so they decided to climb onto one of the portables. He and one of his friends easily climbed on. His third friend was shorter and had a harder time. When they tried helping them up, they saw a 4th person around the corner. His friend was on the ground and heard a noise. Someone else is here. They looked in the direction of the noise and saw someone standing there. My brother asked if it was interested in joining them. He said it looked startled and ran to the open field behind the school. Now, the only light they had was the full moon, but he said it looked like a human, but it had pale skin, long arms and legs, and wings. The thing stopped running, looked back at them and flew into the air. My brother and his friend on the roof of the portable thing jumped off. He told me his third friend on the ground was running back to the village already. All 3 of them made it to the village in 3 minutes. When they got back to the village, they went on to one of my friend's house. My brother called my mom to pick him up, so off she went. The next day, my brother finally told my mom what happened. He doesn't like talking about it until this day. It interests me, but also terrified me, because I know my brother is not easily scared. He's not really known to be a liar either. But he is terrified of that night. This is not my story, but my cousin's, and I thought people would enjoy it. This story happened to me back in the summer of 2010. I was working for a major landscaping company, and the crew I was a part of was the smallest crew. There was just 3 of us. Our job was to prepare new locations for landscaping. We always got to the really cool locations and pretty much do nothing all day. It's that small stuff, planting grass, watering trees, etc. Anyway, you get the point. on top of the school. It was about 4 to 5 feet tall and it had large red eyes, very large wings. It looked like something straight from hell. The wings were like bat wings. They were a dark brown. The creature itself was all black with a massive scar on its left leg, like it had been shot or stabbed. If you have ever seen the movie E.T., its head looked very familiar to that. As soon as it knew, I realized it was there watching me. It jumped off the roof and started walking towards me. I was paralyzed in fear. It walked until it was about 30 feet from me. At the time, I was crying and I stood up and ran back to my grandmother's house as fast as I could. If it wanted me dead, then I wouldn't be writing this. It could have gotten me. There's no doubt about that. As soon as I ran inside, tears flowing down my face, everyone asked me what was wrong. I replied with, I just saw some creature. That's all I could say. I don't know why, but it just seemed like something about this creature was pure predator and it just wanted me.
20-to-1 weather. A simple, beautiful weather app. Users and critics alike have made it one of the top-rated weather apps on Android. What makes One Weather different? Yes. This time we got an answer. Yes. Having never done this before, I thought one of them was pushing the planchette. Both swore that they weren't pushing it. I asked the next question, and we again got an answer. The ghost said his name, but I can't recall what it was. I do, however, remember it was Russian. We continued to ask him questions, like where he lived and how old he was, if he had family, and things like that. Harmless things. And he answered all of them politely. After the 6th or 7th question, I started to feel really cold, like ice cold. I asked my brother if he had turned the radiator on, and he said no. I asked my sister if she was feeling cold, and she too said no. I brushed it off and concentrated on the game again. My brother then asked when he had died, and it turned out that he had died in 1994. I was really intrigued at this point, so I asked how he had died, and this is where everything clicked. After I asked him this question, I immediately got up. "Fuck you," felt out. Feeling slightly uncomfortable, I apologized, and my sister asked a harmless question again, but she got up. "Fuck off." My brother then asked if he was here in this room with us, and if so, where exactly. The ghost spelled out, "Behind Victoria." At this, my skin started crawling, and I wanted to stop playing. My sister and brother both looked in shock. My brother's phone then started ringing. Of course with the freaking Halloween soundtrack, but we all jumped. My brother turned over the planchette and went to answer it. I immediately got up and left the room to calm down, and we never spoke of this event again. Let me start off by saying that I've never considered myself a superstitious person who believes in ghost stories. In fact, I'm the type of individual who desires evidence and facts over anything else. Speed of belief kind of girls. What I am about to tell you might seem made up or over-exaggerated, but believe me if you can, it's not even though I truly wish it was. I don't remember experiencing a paranormal event in my lifetime. That is, until recently. Which, by the way, didn't take place all in one moment in one exact location. This creeps me out even more. And whatever I saw and heard will haunt me for a very long time. Now, I live in a very safe upper-middle-class neighborhood in Maryland. I never hear of robberies, rapes, or murders happening in the specific area where I live, and certainly have had no personal encounters. This is why I am fairly convinced that what I imagine I faced was in the category of ghostly phenomena. This story begins one early morning in the week of May 2016. I remember feeling restless because of my whack sleeping schedule. I tend to like staying up late and sleeping during the day. I've been getting a sufficient amount of sleep. It's just my sleep patterns have been flipped recently. Living on my own in Lancaster while attending college is partially to blame. But I am back home for the summer and trying to fix that issue. So that is why, on this night, I am restless and agitated. Tossing and turning in bed while my parents and sister are sleeping peacefully through the night. It's so dark, so I look at the time on my phone, and it's 5:30 a.m., and I am wide awake. I decided the best thing to do is go and walk around for a little while, and read downstairs until I get drowsy. I tiptoe downstairs, and try to be as stealthy as possible, and to not disturb my family in their slumber. However, every step I take is creaking and squeaking because our house is moderately old, but sturdy nonetheless. I made my way down to the first level, and walked quietly through the main hallway to the back room. Half of this space is an open-style kitchen/dining area, and the other half is a living room. In the middle, dividing these two sections, are glass doors with trim leading to a small deck in the backyard. I turn on the lights nearest to the back doors and sit on one of the couches. I pick up the photo book my sister and I made and begin flipping through each page, one by one. After a minute passes by, I hear something strange, a tapping noise. I look out the window to check to see if it's raining or drizzling outside, and it's not. I listen more intently and try to pinpoint where the noise is coming from, and I notice it's close, uncomfortably close, in one concentrated area, in fact. It sounds like it's coming directly from the other side of the glass doors. There are door jambs on both sides, and the tapping appears to be coming from the vinyl siding next to the door. Steady tapping persists, and I peek out to see if it's an animal, but I see nothing. As I get a closer look, the noise stops abruptly. I can see everything in plain sight. There are no blind spots, and the light is on, so I'm confused as to what I heard. I decide to shrug it off as me being paranoid. I sit back down and open the photo book again. A few seconds later, the noise starts up again, but this time it's not on the vinyl, but instead on the glass of the door directly behind me. This time my adrenaline kicks in, and the sound sends shivers down my spine. My eyes steer my head in the direction of the noise. Turning around and facing the doors, the tapping only grows louder and closer to me. I see nothing there. It makes no sense, and I cannot fathom the moment in my mind. At this point, I am freaking out and bolt down the hall, up the stairs and into my room, quickly shutting the door behind me as I quiver in fear. I get back into bed and hesitantly peek out my window facing the backyard. The neighbor's backyard is directly across from us, bordered by a fence from our yard. They have their beam lights on. It's so bright that some of the light is shining in our yard as well. My eyes are well adjusted to the darkness and can see if there's any suspicious activity going on. I am hoping there's no person trying to break into our home. I peer along the yard and the neighbor's yard for a few minutes, and suddenly my eyes spot movement around the fence. The light helps significantly where I notice this happening. I blink several times for clarity to try and comprehend what I'm seeing. There is definitely movement taking place. However, I cannot piece together who or what it is exactly. I don't see movements of leaves, or the weight of footsteps on the ground. This thing appears to be levitating as if it weighs nothing at all. I think I'm losing my mind. I look away and back, and keep seeing this creature I cannot recognize as anything normal. It is small, black, yet somehow transparent, and is moving in and out through the holes in the fence. As I keep staring, it even curves over the fence, back and forth, up, down, then moves into the yard to suddenly evaporate into thin air. I am not sleep deprived, and I know I am not hallucinating because I basically slept all of yesterday. I am baffled and scared, but at the same time, fascinated. My heart is pounding. I close the curtain and hide like a child under my covers. My eyes are wide as the adrenaline is still pumping through my body. What just happened? I contemplate this for hours until I drift off to sleep. I wake up at around 4 p.m. and am hesitant to tell my family about my paranormal experience. I tell my sister that day. She is intrigued, but skeptical at the same time. I knew she would be. A couple days pass, and my parents, sister, and I are heading to New York City for vacation. Since I told my sister of what happened, I thought I should also inform my mom and dad. I do, in minimal detail, hotel for a night, before commuting another hour the next morning into New York City. My sister and I share a room in a Comfort Suites hotel, and by this point, I try to convince myself that the bizarre ghost-like encounter was a one-time thing, and that I should just let it go and move on. I take some NyQuil, turn off the lights, and get under the covers and try to fall asleep. After a couple minutes, I noticed myself dozing off, but not for long. I had anxiety and panic attacks every now and again. The kind where you feel like you're falling off a cliff, or that your life is escaping your body. Yeah, this happens now and again, but it's nothing unusual. Well, this night it is different. I am comfortably falling asleep until suddenly my eyes open wide and I gasp for air in a state of panic. As I do, I see something. Towering over me, next to my bed, is a tall, dark, semi-transparent figure, very similar to what I thought I saw in my backyard the other night. I flinch backwards in fear. I blink a couple times and all of a sudden it disappeared before my very eyes. Is this thing trying to torment me? Follow me? What is happening? Knowing that my sister is only feet away brings me comfort and a sense of security. I sigh heavily and eventually fall asleep. I attempt to suppress these events, which all took place within a week's time frame. Successfully, during my stay in New York, I distract myself and have a good time. My family and I drive back home the following week, and thoughts of the ghost creep back. Each night before I go to bed, I peek out my window to satisfy my curiosity, but have seen nothing since I arrived home. From now on, I hope I hear no cringe-evoking noises, or awaken to a towering ghost beside my bed trying to haunt me in my sleep. Things are back to normal. For now. When I was about 8 or 9, my mom and I lived alone in a small house.
Hey, what's up, my friend? Calic and I here. In a moment, I'm going to step into my home and pull up my computer and show you exactly.
I was not a particularly paranoid kid, but I did require a nightlight in order to fall asleep. Usually, I would fall asleep with my bedroom door and my closet door open, with the light on in my closet as a nightlight. One morning, I woke up at about 4 a.m. for what I thought was no reason. I just lay there, waiting to fall asleep, when I heard what must have woken me up. A whisper whispering my name. I sat up and looked around, and then heard it again. Thinking it was my mom calling me, I got up and went to her room and opened the door. "Mom, did you call me?" She'd clearly been sleeping soundly. "No, sweetheart, I didn't call you. Go back to bed." "But someone called my name." She gave me a few half-assed explanations on what it could have been to get me back to bed, including a bird that can mimic humans or a religious experience. My mom has always been a very conservative and religious woman, and she usually didn't believe the things that I told her. I must have been satisfied with her answer, because I went back to bed. Of course, a few moments later after I got back into bed, I heard my name being whispered again. For whatever reason, I decided to say, "Hello? What do you want?" But I got no reply. I thought I had pinpointed the source of the voice. It sounded like it was coming from my father, so I went to investigate. There was nothing there. This didn't really scare me, though it did unsettle me. I just decided to go back to bed, and didn't hear it again that night. On another night, several months later, I was sitting on my bed reading a textbook for school when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I looked quickly, I guess expecting that there was nothing there, because then I looked down at my textbook, realizing too late what I had just seen. Even though I only caught a glimpse for a moment, the memory is burned into my mind. Leaning out of my closet and grinning at me was a man, or something close to a man. Its skin was black and brown, and it was bald, resembling a burnt corpse, and its eyes were red and bloodshot. I immediately looked back up to my foot, doing a double take, but it was gone. There was no way anything natural could have disappeared so quickly. I immediately fled my room, but I never mentioned this to my mother because I knew she would never believe me or give me some kind of lecture. When I returned to my room once I had calmed down, there was nothing in my closet. I lived in that house for several years after that, and never experienced anything worth mentioning again. But needless to say, I never slept with that closet door open again. This happened to me a while ago, over a course of a few years, from when I was in 5th grade, all the way up to my freshman year. We moved into a 2-story house with a big pool and a big yard. I had 3 siblings, all younger than me. When we first saw the house, we loved it, just because it had a pool. My mom did too. My dad, however, had this creepy vibe from the house. We brushed it off though. During the first year of us living there, it was okay to say the least. We always had this creepy feeling we were being watched, especially in the basement, where my room was, and in my sister's room on the top floor. Strange things occurred that year. My dog would just stare off into the part of the room or down the hallway and growl and bark at times. Items would be placed where they shouldn't have been, and so forth. Fast forward to winter of 6th grade. It was getting freezing cold in my room, so I bunked with my brothers in their room on the top floor. Right next to my brother's room was my parents' room. My sister's room was down the hall, closest to the stairs. It was late, about 11 or 12 at night. I was the only one up, watching Dragon Ball Z. When I turned the TV off and started to fall asleep, I was startled to hear my sister screaming and crying bloody murder. It woke everyone up. My dad and I rushed out of our rooms to my sister's room. From how she was screaming, you would have thought someone was abducting her. We even expected to see someone talking to her. But when we got there, it was just my sister standing on her bed crying. Diagonal from her was a closet, which was open. When we asked her what was wrong, she told us that a little boy, wearing a mask with blood-red eyes, was in her closet. She said he likes to hide in there, away from everyone else. This freaked me and the rest of my family out, but we thought it was just a bad dream. Until it happened 2 more times, and it was odd that she was seeing a boy. The only death we found that occurred in the house was an old man who passed from a heart attack. No children. My sister refused to sleep in her own room ever again, unless she had someone in there with her. If I head to 7th grade, my great-grandmother had suffered her 2nd stroke. She wasn't going to make it. My family brought her home so she would at least be comfortable for her last days. When she finally passed on April 28th, 3 weeks after my birthday, we buried her. And life was a little hard, but we carried on. A few months after her death, I was Micah home. Micah is home. My dad and I looked at each other confused, then asked her, "What do you mean Micah's home, sissy?" My sister said, "He's right there, standing at the sink looking at us." Me and my dad looked back at each other with a look of, what the hell? Then my sister looked sad and said that Micah left. At this point, the feelings of being watched would stop, as well as everything else I had said earlier. But after that day, the feeling of calm in the house left, and things got bad. Things took a turn for the worst in 8th grade. There was a negativity in the house. A tension I couldn't explain. Like, this feeling of dread that left you once you walked outside. My family became very short-tempered, including myself. My dog would growl and bark at nothing, and he would never leave the room we were in. My parents fought more than I had ever seen, and they eventually divorced. I started having really bad nightmares, and the worst part was that they felt so real. One time, I dreamt I was in my room. It was dark and I heard all whispers around me. I ran up the stairs to the kitchen, but before reaching the top, something grabbed my ankle and pulled me down the steps. I clawed and fought, but was dragged down, all the way to the section of the basement that was closed off for the laundry. That's when I woke up, and noticed hand marks on my ankles where I had been pulled. I freaked out, and the nightmares just kept getting worse. One night that I can remember, sealed it. I had another nightmare about being locked in my room, and from my window I could see my parents and siblings leaving, and I was screaming for them to come back and help me, but they couldn't hear me. When I woke up, I saw a shadowy figure standing near the corner of my room. It was just there, looking at me. I darted from my bed and ran upstairs. Before I reached the top step, I felt a slap on the heel of my foot. I got to the top, slammed the door, and went to the back room while my dog slept, turned on the TV, and refused to sleep the rest of the night. My dog growled in the direction of the hall leading back to the kitchen for a good while, then eventually stopped. We moved out of there a month later, when my mom couldn't afford to keep the house and got a nice apartment. The feeling of anger and dread never hung over me again like a cloud like it had done for so long. Everyone got a lot better after moving out of that place. I am a senior this year, and to this day the house is vacant. The city it's in is extremely expensive, but my dad and I were shocked to see it online selling for $100,000 cheaper than it was worth. The house was just rotting away, despite all the work we'd put into it when we lived there. I talked to my brothers about it a week ago, just reflecting upon it. They told me they saw the same shadowy figure in their room as well. One of my brothers thought that he saw a shadow smile at him once. My sister doesn't really like to talk about the boy with the mask. He did, however, tell me he played hide and seek with an old man. He said he was nice, and looked a lot like my grandpa who had died before my sister was even born. He said she played only one time, when she found him hiding under the bed. She told me that his demeanor wasn't scary, but she said that he claimed he was trying to scare her, but she wasn't scared. To this day, I'm glad I don't live there anymore, and I hope no one else lives there. Ever. I am almost 50 now, but I still remember that night in October 1982, when I was a senior in high school. I'd been out, and by the time I got home, my parents were already in bed. I sat and watched TV for a while, then I headed to bed at about 12:30 or so. I hadn't been down long, when I heard what sounded like someone walking in the attic above me. At first, I tried to tell myself that it was just a squirrel in between the ceiling and the attic floor. That had happened before. It didn't sound like squirrels though. It sounded like a man in heavy boots walking from one end of the crossbar of a T-shaped attic to the other, right above my room. Then it stopped. I don't know how long, but I do remember I started to drift off when the pacing started again. This time, it went from one end of the crossbar to the other, and then back to the top of the T-stand. The attic stairs began there. The stem was over the hallway and my parents' bedroom. The steps went down the stem, back up, back across the crossbar, over my room, then back, stopping at the top of the attic stairs. I was scared, but I wasn't thinking ghost. I was thinking someone had broken into our house earlier in the evening and was either checking out what was good to steal, or worse. When the boot steps started down the attic steps, I panicked. I sat up, because the attic door is right next to my bedroom. Even though it's locked, it would have been nothing to boot open the door. I sat there, looking at the attic door, the footfall stopping at the bottom step. It was silent for what seemed like forever, but it was probably only 10 seconds or so. That's when I saw and heard the door handle to the attic twist back and forth.